The world of magic doesn't end with the turning of a page. Love rises and falls anew, forbidden like poison or blazing like a phoenix's flame. The heroes we thought we knew uncover their hearts once more. So step into the enchantment of emotion and welcome to a world where love is written anew. The wind swept across the Carpathian peaks, carrying the scent of snow and pine and something else, something older. Hermione Granger stood at the edge of a narrow trail, her boots crunching over frost-hardened moss, her breath forming faint clouds in the cold morning air. The world around her felt vast and untouched, a place where magic whispered rather than shouted. She adjusted the strap of her satchel and glanced at the parchment map in her hands. Field Camp Ardeel, 2 miles ahead, it read in careful ink. She sighed. 2 miles could mean anything in these mountains. The locals had told her that paths shifted here, that the land itself had moods. Hermione didn't believe in moody landscapes, but she did believe in strong magic. And there was plenty of that humming beneath her boots. It had been 3 years since she'd joined the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, and she'd spent most of it behind a desk. When the invitation arrived, an expedition to study a newly discovered dragon species, she couldn't resist. The Eastern European Ministry wanted her expertise on magical classifications, and, truthfully, she'd missed the thrill of fieldwork. But she hadn't expected this kind of isolation. The nearest village was a full day's hike behind her, and ahead stretched endless ridges wrapped in fog. A flicker of movement caught her eye, a silver shape darting between trees. She froze. Too small for a dragon, too quick for a person. For a heartbeat, she felt watched. Then the shape was gone, swallowed by mist. "Lovely," she muttered. "My first hour here, and I'm already imagining dragons." By midday, she reached the expedition camp, a collection of enchanted tents nestled in a hollow between cliffs. Smoke rose from a small fire, and the air buzzed faintly with protection charms. A witch in heavy furs waved her wand, reinforcing the perimeter wards, while 2 wizards levitated crates marked "Handle with care, dragon scales." Hermione straightened her cloak and stepped forward. "Hermione Granger, Department Representative." The witch turned and smiled. "Ah, our British expert. Welcome. I'm Dr. Ilara Borskova, Lead Coordinator. Come, let me show you around." The camp was organized chaos. Maps pinned to boards, potion flasks bubbling beside open journals, a tent filled with faintly glowing bones. "The locals call it the silvery wyvern," Ilara explained as they walked. "We've found traces of scales, some nearly transparent. The creature seems to nest somewhere higher in the northern range, very territorial. No one's seen it directly, only shadows." "Fascinating," Hermione murmured, leaning over a sketch. The shape was sleek and sinuous, its wings almost translucent. "Has anyone analyzed the magical residue from the scales?" "We have samples in storage, though you might want to speak with our new consultant. He arrived yesterday, knows more about dragon lineages than any of us." Hermione smiled politely. "I'll be glad to meet him." Ilara gestured toward a tent near the fire. "That one. He's a bit particular, but brilliant." Hermione approached, the flap of the tent stirring with the wind. Inside, the light was soft and golden, falling over shelves of dragon hide fragments and open tomes. A man stood with his back to her, blonde hair catching the firelight, his wand tip glowing as he traced runes over a large piece of parchment. "Excuse me," Hermione said, her voice steady but polite. He turned, and her heart jolted. "Granger!" Draco Malfoy's voice was calm, low, and unmistakably familiar. For a moment, neither spoke. Time seemed to stretch between them, from the rubble of Hogwarts to this frozen mountain camp. "I didn't realize you'd—" she began. He smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth tightening. "That I'd traded mana life for dragon scales. Neither did I." Hermione blinked, searching for something sensible to say. "You're working with the expedition?" "Studying draconic ancestry," Draco replied, rolling up the parchment. "Specifically, a branch connected to early wizarding families. The Malfoys, as it happens, had a few ties." "Of course they did." "I see," she said coolly, folding her arms. "So, this is a family project?" "You could call it that," he said. "I prefer to think of it as professional rehabilitation." She caught the flicker of dry humor in his tone and wasn't sure if it was disarming or infuriating. He looked older, leaner, and far quieter than the boy she'd once known. The arrogance was muted, replaced by something sharper, restraint. "Well," she said at last, "as long as we can work together without hexing each other." He gave a slight bow. "I'm capable of civility, Granger. You might even enjoy it." Hermione fought a smile, but lost the battle halfway. "We'll see." Later that evening, as dusk fell over the camp, Hermione sat by the fire with her journal, pretending not to watch Draco across the flames. He was sketching something. Wings, scales, symbols she didn't recognize. Around them, the mountains loomed dark and endless. A sudden crackle in the air made everyone glance up. The wards flickered blue, then steadied again. Elara frowned. "It's happening more often," she murmured. "What is?" Hermione asked. "The mountain magic. It shifts. Some say the dragons guard something. A relic called the Heart of the Dragon. Just a legend, of course." Hermione frowned thoughtfully. Legends often had a kernel of truth. Across the fire, Draco's quill paused. He said nothing, but his expression changed, just slightly, as though the words had struck a hidden chord. And for the first time that day, Hermione wondered what, exactly, had brought Draco Malfoy to these mountains. The wind howled beyond the cliffs, carrying a faint, haunting roar. The morning broke pale and sharp, the sky a sweep of steel above the jagged ridges. Frost glistened on the tent ropes like spun glass, and the air hummed faintly with unseen energy, the kind that prickled on Hermione's skin and made her wand twitch in its holster. She emerged from her tent wrapped in a thick cloak, brushing stray snowflakes from her hair. Around her, the camp stirred to life. Cauldrons hissed, parchments fluttered, and voices rose in several languages, all muffled by the wind. Elara was already bent over a table, poring over maps. "We'll move north today," she told Hermione. "The trackers reported fresh signs near the glacial pass. It's risky, but we can't ignore it." "Have they found actual evidence of the creature?" Hermione asked, warming her hands near the fire. "A few scales and melted snow, as if scorched by silver fire," Elara said. "Our consultant has been studying the pattern all night." Hermione didn't have to ask who she meant. She looked toward the far end of the camp, where Draco stood in the cold, his cloak whipping behind him as he examined a set of gleaming shards. When she approached, he didn't look up. You shouldn't walk this close without protective gloves, he said. The residue could burn through fabric. Good morning to you too, Hermione replied dryly. May I? He handed her one of the fragments. It shimmered faintly, its edges razor-sharp yet almost weightless. Dragon scale, he said, but not like any known breed. The composition is closer to crystal than keratin. It reacts to wand light. Watch. He flicked his wand, and the shard flared white, releasing a low hum that seemed to echo in the mountains. Hermione felt it in her chest, a vibration that tugged at something deep and ancient. When the light faded, she exhaled slowly. That sound, she murmured. It wasn't echoing. It was calling. Draco nodded. Dragons communicate through sound, but this felt almost sentient, as if it was aware of being observed. They shared a glance, wary, curious, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. By midday, the expedition set off, wands at the ready, boots sinking into snow. The path wound upward through pine forests and over frozen streams, where the ice glowed faintly with runes that none of them could decipher. Hermione walked beside Draco, though neither seemed eager to admit it was by choice. Still lecturing dragons into submission? He asked after a while, his tone teasing but softer than she remembered. I prefer to understand them, she said. Unlike some people, I don't assume everything dangerous must be controlled. Draco's lips curved faintly. You sound just like Hagrid. I'll take that as a compliment. He chuckled, low and genuine, the first time she'd heard him laugh since Hogwarts. It startled her, that sound. It didn't belong to the boy who'd sneered in school corridors. It belonged to the man he'd become. Weary, perhaps, but not hollow. They reached a narrow ledge overlooking a vast valley. A sudden gust tore through, scattering snow into glittering spirals. Below, a shadow moved across the white, vast, gliding, silent. Hermione's breath caught. Merlin's beard, she whispered. It's real. The creature's scales shimmered like moonlight through fog, its wings spanning wider than a Quidditch pitch. It circled once, then vanished into the clouds, leaving a trail of faint silver sparks that drifted down like ash. Ilara's voice rang out behind them. Mark the sighting. That was no ordinary dragon. It's almost ethereal. But Hermione's gaze had drifted to Draco. His expression was unreadable, though a faint tremor ran through his hand as he lowered his wand. Are you all right? She asked. He hesitated. It's just familiar. My father used to tell me stories about a dragon bound to the Malfoy line, a guardian of treasure lost centuries ago. I thought they were myths. Hermione studied him quietly. Do you think this creature is connected? I think everything here is connected, he said. The mountains, the relic, the dragon, and perhaps my family. The group pressed on until nightfall. They set camp beside a frozen lake, its surface reflecting the stars like shards of broken glass. Hermione couldn't shake the image of the dragon's eyes, luminous, almost human. She took first watch, sitting by the fire, her quills scratching notes into her journal. Draco appeared sometime later, a cloak thrown over his shoulders, a faint shadow under his eyes. Can't sleep? He asked. Too many questions, she admitted. Every answer brings 3 more. He sat beside her, the firelight painting his face in amber and gold. That hasn't changed, he said with a half smile. You were always insufferably curious. And you were always insufferably smug, she shot back, though there was warmth in her tone. Silence settled between them, comfortable for once. The fire cracked softly. Somewhere in the distance, a low rumble echoed. Not thunder, not wind. A dragon's call. Draco turned his head toward the sound. "They're closer than we think." "Do you trust Elara?" Hermione asked suddenly. His eyes flicked to her. "Do you?" She hesitated. "I trust her research, but something about this expedition feels off. The wards falter too often, and that relic, everyone talks about it as if it's real." "It is real," Draco said quietly. "The heart of the dragon. My family spent generations trying to find it. They believed it could bind a wizard's magic to a dragon's, pure power drawn from living flame. But it always exacted a price." Hermione frowned. "A price?" He looked into a fire. "Blood magic, the kind you don't undo." The flames crackled higher, casting shadows like wings on the snow. For a long moment, Hermione said nothing. Then softly, "If you found it, what would you do?" His gaze lifted to hers, grey and steady. "That depends on who I'd be when I found it." Their eyes held, the firelight flickering between them. Then the sound came again, a roar so deep it shook the ground. The camp erupted in shouts. Wards flared bright, then shattered like glass. Hermione was on her feet in an instant, wand drawn. "Above us!" Through the darkness, a massive shape descended, silver scales flashing, wings slicing the air. The dragon's roar thundered across the valley, and for a heartbeat, Hermione thought she saw intelligence in its gaze. Not fury, warning. "Down!" Draco shouted, grabbing her arm as the creature swept low. A gust of icy wind knocked them both into the snow, the world exploding in light and sound. The dragon vanished as suddenly as it came, leaving behind a sky full of falling embers. When the echoes faded, Hermione realized Draco's hand was still gripping hers. Their breaths mingled in the cold air. "Well," she said, voice trembling slightly. "That was close." Draco's smile was grim but real. "You always did have a talent for attracting chaos. Remind me to add that to my resume." Above them, the clouds parted, revealing the full moon. Its light shimmered across the lake, and there, at its center, the ice had cracked open. From the depths below, a faint silver glow pulsed, slow and rhythmic, like the beating of a heart. The glow from beneath the lake pulsed again, brighter this time, as if something ancient had stirred from a long slumber. The expedition gathered at the water's edge, torches raised high, breaths pluming white in the frozen air. The crack that had opened across the surface now spread like veins of light through the ice, each pulse accompanied by a low, thrumming sound that seemed to come from the mountain itself. Elara's voice trembled with awe. "It can't be. It's resonating with the dragon's call." Hermione crouched down, wand steady. "It's magical. Deep magic, old as the mountains. The resonance is harmonic, not chaotic. It's responding to something alive." Draco stood beside her, the reflection of the light flickering in his grey eyes. "Or to someone," he murmured. The sound deepened. Then, as if drawn by invisible strings, a column of silver mist rose from the crack, swirling upward into the air. It twisted, shimmered, and formed the faint shape of wings before dissolving into the wind. The glow beneath the ice dimmed, retreating back into darkness. The silence that followed was heavy, uneasy. Even the air felt still, as though holding its breath. Elara finally exhaled. Everyone back to camp. No one approaches the lake again until we understand what we're dealing with." The group dispersed, murmuring in disbelief. Hermione lingered, her gaze still fixed on the dark water. Draco hadn't moved either. "You felt that too, didn't you?" she said quietly. He nodded. "It called to you. To both of us," she corrected. Their eyes met, and though neither spoke, both knew something had shifted between them. Whatever slept beneath that lake had recognized them, or perhaps chosen them. Back at camp, Ilara assigned extra wards, her voice brisk to cover her unease. Hermione retired to her tent, but sleep refused to come. Her mind raced with questions: the relic, the dragon, the resonance, and Draco's face, the strange calm he'd shown when the light appeared. She tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but deep down she knew better. Sometime past midnight, she heard movement outside her tent. Quiet, deliberate. She reached for her wand. "Who's there?" "It's me," came Draco's voice, low and careful. She pulled the flap open, and he stood there cloaked against the wind, holding a parchment. "I found something," he said. "You might want to see this." Inside her tent, he spread the parchment across her cot. It was an ancient map, its edges frayed, its ink faded to a deep brown. In the corner, the Malfoy crest was half burned, but still visible. "This was my great-grandfather's," Draco explained. He believed the first Malfoys weren't only collectors of magical artifacts, they were guardians. There's a passage in his notes about a heart of flame hidden in the Carpathians, bound by dragon blood. Hermione bent over the parchment. "That symbol here, it's the same as the one etched on the runes near the lake." Draco nodded. "Exactly. He wrote that the relic was sealed by a dragon and a wizard, their bond meant to protect the magic of the mountains from those unworthy to wield it. But if the bond breaks..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The tremor beneath the ice had been warning enough. Hermione's brow furrowed. "You think your family was part of that binding?" Draco's gaze flicked to the crest. "I think we may have been the ones who broke it." Outside, the wind moaned against the cliffs, sounding almost like a distant roar. At dawn, the expedition broke camp and continued north, following the dragon's trail deeper into the mountains. The terrain grew wilder, more treacherous, cliffs veined with ice, forests silent as cathedrals. The further they went, the stronger the sense of being watched. Hermione found herself walking beside Draco more often than not. It wasn't deliberate, not entirely. He understood the terrain, read the signs of dragon movement with uncanny precision, and seemed oddly attuned to the land. At times he'd pause mid-step, head tilted as if listening to something she couldn't hear. "What is it?" she asked once, as they crossed a ravine blanketed in mist. "Breathing," he said softly. "The mountain's alive. Can't you feel it?" Hermione frowned, but listened. And there it was, a faint rhythm beneath the crunch of their boots. Not wind, not water, a heartbeat. They reached a ridge overlooking a wide valley carved from rock and snow. At its center stood a stone archway, half buried and covered in frost. Ancient runes glowed faintly along its surface, the same shimmering silver as the dragon's scales. Ilara's excitement was barely contained. This must be it, the entrance to the nesting ground. The team began setting up observation wards, but Hermione's attention was on Draco. He'd gone utterly still, eyes fixed on the archway as if entranced. "Draco," she said softly. He didn't answer. Slowly he stepped forward, snow crunching beneath his boots, until he stood before the arch. His gloved hand rose and touched one of the runes. The moment his fingers brushed the stone, light surged through it, bright and blinding. The air vibrated. "Draco!" Hermione shouted, reaching for him, but too late. The light enveloped them both. When the brilliance faded, they were standing somewhere else entirely. The air was warm, thick with mist. Around them, vast caverns glimmered with crystalline light, and high above, something shifted. Wings, enormous and silent. A dragon. It was the same silvery creature they had seen from afar, only now its presence filled the air like a storm. Its eyes, ancient and intelligent, locked on them both. Hermione's breath caught in her throat. "Merlin," she whispered. Draco stepped forward, awe in every line of his face. "It's not attacking." The dragon lowered its massive head, nostrils flaring, breath like a cold wind against their skin. Hermione felt the world narrow to that moment. Her, Draco, and the dragon's steady, thunderous heart. Then, as if testing them, it spoke. Not in words, but in sound. A deep, resonant hum that filled the chamber. Hermione felt it vibrate through her chest, through her very bones. Images flickered in her mind. Fire, stone, two figures bound by magic and flame, sealing something deep beneath the mountain. The hum ceased, and the dragon's gaze fell on Draco. A mark flared faintly on his wrist, a sigil shaped like a dragon's eye. Hermione's eyes widened. "What's happening?" Draco stared at his hand, pale and shaken. "I think it's choosing me." The dragon exhaled a final gust of cold air, then rose, wings spreading. With a single, powerful beat, it vanished into the dark above, leaving only the echo of its cry and a shimmer of light that hung in the air like falling stars. Hermione turned to Draco, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're connected to it now." He looked at her, fear and wonder mingling in his eyes, or cursed by it. From the shadows of the cavern came a sound, soft footsteps, human. Hermione's wand flew into her hand, but the voice that followed was calm, familiar. "Ilara," Draco said, relief flickering briefly, then fading when he saw her expression. Her wand was raised. "I'm sorry," Ilara said, "but you weren't meant to find it first." And with that, the ground beneath them began to shake, and the walls of the cavern flared alive with silver fire. The cavern shook with a deep rumble that sent dust spiraling down from the high, unseen ceiling. The light from the runes flared, reflecting off the stone walls in blinding flashes. Hermione stumbled backward, her wand raised. Draco caught her arm, steadying her as the ground cracked beneath their feet. "Ilara, what are you doing?" Hermione demanded, her voice echoing sharply in the shimmering vastness. The older witch stepped forward, the silver glow from the runes painting her face in eerie light. Her eyes gleamed, not with madness, but with purpose. "You think I led this expedition to study a creature, Miss Granger? No, I came to reclaim what was stolen from my people centuries ago." Draco's jaw tightened. "The heart of the dragon." Ilara's smile was thin, brittle. "Yes. You see, the first guardians were not the Malfoys. My ancestors were the keepers of the heart before your family betrayed them. The dragon's bond was broken and the relic lost. But now it awakens again, and I will finish what they began." The air pulsed, a low hum reverberating through the chamber walls. The light on Draco's wrist brightened, answering the vibration like an echo. "Ilara, stop!" Hermione shouted, her wand crackling with blue sparks. "You'll bring the entire mountain down." Better the mountain fall than the magic fade, Ilara hissed. She turned her wand toward the runes and began chanting, words in an old tongue, heavy and sharp as thunder. The lines of silver across the walls brightened until the cavern seemed to burn. Draco swore under his breath. "We need to break the spell. Now!" Hermione's mind raced. She recognized fragments of the incantation, binding magic interwoven with summoning. The dragon wasn't just being called, it was being bound again. And the focus of that spell, Hermione's gaze flicked to Draco's mark, was standing right beside her. Without hesitation, she stepped between him and Ilara, her wand cutting through the air in a sharp counterarc. "Finite incantatem!" the cavern screamed as the spell collided with Ilara's chant. A shockwave tore through the air, sending all three sprawling to the ground. The runes flickered violently, their silver light now turning a deep crimson. Hermione pushed herself up, coughing. The ground trembled, cracks racing across the floor like lightning. From somewhere deep below came a roar, furious, alive, impossibly vast. Draco pulled her to her feet. "You've just made it very angry." "That wasn't me," Hermione shot back, her eyes wide. "It's reacting to her magic." Ilara rose slowly, her hair disheveled, her wand clutched tight. "It doesn't matter. The heart is waking. None of you can stop it now." A blinding burst of light erupted from the center of the chamber, throwing them all backward. When Hermione opened her eyes, she saw it, the heart of the dragon. It floated above the cracked stone, a sphere of glowing crystal pulsing with a rhythm that mimicked a heartbeat. Each throb sent ripples of energy through the air, lifting dust and shards of rock into weightless motion. It was beautiful, terrible, alive. Draco stared, transfixed. "It's real." Hermione reached out instinctively, then stopped, sensing the overwhelming power radiating from it. "Don't touch it," she warned. "It's pure dragon magic. It could kill you." Ilara's laughter was soft and bitter. "Only if it rejects you. But it won't reject me." She stepped forward, wand extended. "I am its rightful heir." Before Hermione could react, Ilara's spell struck the sphere. The chamber filled with blinding light, and then silence. When the glare faded, Ilara stood frozen, her face pale, her wand hand trembling. The heart had changed. It no longer hovered above the ground, but hovered before Draco. Its light pulsed in time with the mark on his wrist. Ilara's voice broke. "No, not you. It can't be you." Draco looked equally shocked. "I didn't—" The heart moved, slowly, deliberately, until it hovered just above his chest. A faint glow spread across his skin, threads of silver light weaving upward toward his throat and down his arm. Hermione's pulse quickened. "Draco," she whispered, "it's bonding with you." He grimaced, sweat beading at his temple. "It feels like it's burning through me." Ilara's spell forced the connection, Hermione said, her mind racing. It recognized the old bloodline, the one your family bound to it centuries ago. "Can you stop it?" She hesitated. "I can try, but it'll hurt." "Do it." She raised her wand, drawing runes in the air, murmuring countercharms under her breath. The energy in the room thrashed, wild and uncontained. Sparks flared where her spell met the heart's power. Draco's knees buckled, and she caught him just as another surge of light flooded the chamber. A thunderous roar tore through the air. The dragon reappeared, bursting from a fissure in the cavern wall, its massive wings scattering debris in every direction. Its scales glowed white-hot, eyes burning like molten silver. Hermione's voice shook. "It's guarding the heart." "No," Draco said weakly, forcing himself upright. "It's guarding me now." The dragon lowered its head until its snout nearly touched the glowing sphere. The light dimmed, pulsing in rhythm with the creature's breath. For a fleeting moment, the chaos stilled. Hermione felt it too, a connection that wasn't just between man and beast, but something older, deeper. Then Elara screamed, her fury breaking the stillness. "You were never meant to have it!" She raised her wand and hurled a curse that blazed crimson through the mist. Hermione spun, intercepting it mid-air. The spell burst in a flash of light, sending her stumbling backward. Draco lunged forward, shielding her instinctively. The curse exploded against his protective charm, flinging both of them to the ground. The heart flared brighter than ever, reacting to the surge of emotion, fear, anger, protectiveness, all blending into one. The dragon roared, and for a terrifying instant, Hermione thought the mountain would collapse around them. When the light finally subsided, Elara was gone. Only her wand remained, lying charred and smoking where she had stood. The heart hovered between them, silent now, its light dimming to a steady glow. Hermione knelt beside Draco. His breathing was shallow, the mark on his wrist still glowing faintly. She pressed her hand against his arm, channeling a cooling charm to steady the pulse of magic. Don't move," she said softly. He managed a weak smile. "You're bossy as ever." Hermione exhaled, the tension easing just a little. "Someone has to keep you alive." They sat in the dim light, surrounded by the hum of settling stone. The dragon had vanished again, its presence lingering only as warmth in the air. The heart floated nearby, its light softer now, less threatening, almost peaceful. Hermione looked at it, then at Draco. "It bonded with you, whether you wanted it or not. That means the heart's power is linked to your life now." He met her gaze, weary but resolute. "Then we'd better make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands." Outside, somewhere beyond the shattered cavern walls, the dawn was breaking, a thin ribbon of gold creeping over the snow. The storm had passed, but the mountains seemed to watch them still, as if waiting to see what would come next. Hermione rose, brushing dust from her cloak, and extended a hand to Draco. "Come on," she said quietly. "Let's find a way out before the mountain decides to wake again." He took her hand, his grip firm despite the tremor that ran through it. As they began the climb toward the light, the heart of the dragon followed, hovering just behind them like a silent guardian, its faint glow casting long shadows on the stone. And though neither said it aloud, both knew this was only the beginning. The climb back through the cavern was long and perilous. The once solid pathways had become treacherous slopes of fractured stone and glittering frost. Hermione led the way, wandlight cutting a path through the swirling mist, while Draco followed close behind, one hand pressed to his chest, where the faint glow of the heart's bond still pulsed beneath his robes. Neither spoke for a long while. The echo of the dragon's roar still rang in their bones, and the air was heavy with a lingering scent of smoke and ancient magic. When they finally emerged from the narrow passage and into the pale light of dawn, the cold struck like a living thing, sharp, clean, and merciless. Hermione inhaled deeply, her breath frosting in the air. "We made it," she murmured, glancing toward the far peaks bathed in gold. Draco gave a low, dry laugh. Barely. He sank onto a boulder, exhaustion carving deep lines into his face. The heart of the dragon hovered nearby, silent and still, its glow faint in the daylight. Hermione turned to study him, concern shadowing her features. How are you feeling? Like I've swallowed a thunderstorm, he said, flexing his fingers. It's quiet now, but I can feel it, like something inside me is breathing that isn't mine. She frowned. You're connected to its essence. The heart isn't just a relic. It's alive in its own way. You and it are bound by the same pulse now. He looked up at her, eyes weary but steady. You make it sound almost poetic. It isn't, she said gently. It's dangerous. They both fell silent. Around them, the world stretched vast and wild, the endless sweep of the Carpathians, their peaks veiled in drifting clouds. Somewhere beyond, the dragon's shadow moved, invisible but felt. By midday, they found their way back to the remains of the expedition camp. It was half destroyed, tents torn open, crates overturned, the remnants of protective wards fizzing weakly in the air. The others had fled during the chaos. Only scattered belongings remained, a broken telescope, a smouldering campfire, and a trail of footprints leading down the mountain. They must have evacuated, Hermione said softly, kneeling beside a torn map. I can't blame them. That cave nearly collapsed. Draco examined the wreckage with a detached calm. Ilara planned this for months. She must have had help, someone funding her. The kind of research she did doesn't happen in secret without gold behind it. Hermione folded her arms. Who would back a mission like this? The heart's existence isn't even recorded in the Ministry's archives. He gave her a pointed look. Exactly. Whoever she worked for knew what they were looking for. The thought unsettled Hermione. Then they'll come after us next. Us, Draco repeated, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Not just you. That's progress. Hermione rolled her eyes, though her expression softened. If we're going to survive this, we'll need to work together, properly this time. He inclined his head in mock solemnity. Lead the way, Professor. They set to work repairing what they could. Hermione reactivated the camp's wards, weaving protective runes into the snow itself. Draco scavenged supplies and conjured a new fire, his movements slow but precise. Every so often, Hermione caught him glancing at the heart, as though expecting it to speak. As evening fell, the wind carried a distant sound, faint, rhythmic, almost musical. It rose and fell like the echo of wings. Hermione looked up from her notes. Do you hear that? Draco nodded. It's been following us since the cave. The dragon doesn't want to lose sight of its heart. He stood, walking a few paces from the fire. The glow beneath his wrist shimmered faintly in response to the distant sound. It's not threatening us, he said, almost to himself. It's watching. Hermione joined him, her gaze tracing the dark horizon. Then it sees more than we do. The night deepened. Stars spilled across the sky, sharp and clear, their light reflecting off the snow. The heart floated near the fire, its surface shimmering with soft pulses of silver. Hermione couldn't help but be drawn to it. It radiated a kind of peace now, as if resting after the storm. She sat cross-legged beside the flames, her parchments spread out on her lap. It's astonishing, she murmured. The heart's power isn't destructive by nature, it's symbiotic. It binds magic through emotion, through intent. That's why it responded to you, Draco. You weren't seeking power. You were trying to protect. He glanced at her, brow furrowed. You're saying it? Chose me because I wasn't like my family? Perhaps because you were different, she said softly. Or perhaps because you wanted to be. He looked into the fire, saying nothing for a while. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. I spent years trying to fix the Malfoy name. But maybe redemption doesn't come through rebuilding old walls. Maybe it's walking away from them. Hermione smiled faintly. That's something I wish more people understood. They sat in silence after that, the fire crackling between them. The cold no longer bit so harshly, and the stars above seemed to burn brighter. For a moment, it almost felt like peace. But peace in these mountains never lasted long. A sudden shimmer rippled through the ward Hermione had set around the camp. She shot to her feet, wand raised. Someone's here. Draco moved beside her, already drawing his wand. Can you see how many? She focused on the ward's energy. 2. No, 3 signatures. Moving fast. Before either could react, a jet of red light tore through the darkness, shattering one of the wards. The snow exploded where it struck, sending shards of ice into the air. Draco cursed under his breath, pulling Hermione behind a fallen crate. Friendly conversations over, he muttered. Hermione's heart pounded. They're not from the expedition. Their magic feels different, foreign, darker. A second blast of light struck the ground nearby. The air hummed with spells. Draco leaned out, returning fire with a burst of silver flame that scattered the attackers' shadows across the snow. Get to the heart, Hermione shouted. If they take it... But the heart was already reacting. Its glow brightened, pulsing faster, the hum deepening to a resonant thrum that shook the air. The attackers froze, their spells faltering mid-air. Then, in a burst of light, the heart unleashed a wave of pure force. The snow whipped into a blizzard. Hermione threw up a shield just in time to block the shockwave. When the wind died, the mountains were silent once more. The attackers were gone, vanished or scattered by the heart's power. Draco lowered his wand slowly. Remind me not to make it angry. Hermione stared at the floating orb, its glow steady once more. It protected us. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Or it protected itself. Either way, we're alive. She gave a shaky laugh. That's enough for now. As the wind quieted, the two of them stood side by side, the faint hum of the heart between them and the snow stretching endless around. For the first time since they had entered these mountains, Hermione felt the strange certainty that their fates, hers, his, and the dragon's, were now intertwined. Draco turned toward her, his voice low. When this is over, Granger, do you think anyone will believe us? She smiled, tired but fierce. Let's survive it first, then we'll worry about being believed. Above them, the stars seemed to pulse in rhythm with the faint glow of the heart. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the dragon roared again, not in fury, but in warning. The sound rolled across the peaks like a promise, and both of them knew their journey was far from over. The next morning broke with a veil of fog lying low across the valley. The snow reflected the pale light in a way that made it seem almost unreal, the kind of morning where the world felt caught between dream and waking. Hermione rose first, stepping quietly from her tent, her wand flicking to melt the frost from her cloak. The camp was silent, save for the faint hum of the heart of the dragon, which hovered a few feet away, its glow softened to a slow, steady pulse. She studied it for a long while, that strange and beautiful thing. It reminded her of a living creature at rest, its rhythm matching her heartbeat when she stood too close. Every rational part of your mind screamed that this was dangerous. That power of this magnitude should never have been bound to a person. And yet, the thought of separating Draco from it filled her with an inexplicable unease. Behind her, the crunch of boots broke the stillness. Draco emerged from his tent, hair damp from melted frost, his expression drawn but alert. The mark on his wrist glowed faintly beneath his glove. "You've been up for hours," he said. "I couldn't sleep," Hermione admitted. "I kept hearing something, like a whisper in the wards." "That wasn't imagination," he replied. "I heard it too. It was speaking a language I didn't recognize, ancient, almost serpentine." Hermione's brow furrowed. The dragon's tongue. He nodded grimly. "I think it's calling to the heart." She turned toward the horizon where the mist thickened into clouds. "Then we don't have much time. The dragon's connection is growing stronger." Draco gave a small, humorless smile. "You mean our connection?" They spent the morning preparing to leave. The mountain paths ahead were rough and unmarked, winding toward the deeper ranges, where, according to Ilara's stolen notes, the dragon's nesting grounds lay hidden. Hermione packed carefully, her movements efficient, though her thoughts were far from calm. The image of Ilara's eyes, wide with both awe and fury as the heart rejected her, lingered in Hermione's mind like a ghost. When they set out, the fog began to thin, revealing the vast wilderness before them. Pines stretched in dark lines against the snow, and the air shimmered faintly with residual magic. The trek was steep, the wind biting through their cloaks, but neither complained. The only sounds were the crunch of snow underfoot and the occasional crack of ice as they crossed frozen streams. Hours passed before Draco spoke again. "I keep thinking about what she said, about betrayal." Hermione glanced at him. "Ilara believed your family stole the heart from her ancestors." "She wasn't entirely wrong," he admitted. "The Malfoys' history is riddled with half-truths and erased records. I used to think the worst part of that legacy was the shame. But now—" He trailed off, gazing down at his marked wrist. "Now, I wonder if it's the responsibility." Hermione slowed her pace. "Responsibility can be a kind of redemption." He met her gaze, something flickering behind his eyes. "You sound like you've forgiven me already." She smiled faintly. "I didn't say that." He huffed a laugh, though it lacked his usual edge. "Fair enough." By midday, they reached a ravine where the earth itself seemed to pulse faintly with light. The magic here was dense, ancient, and heavy. As they descended, runes appeared carved into the rock walls. Not human, not goblin, but something far older. The lines glowed faintly silver, resonating with the heart's rhythm. "This place was built by magic itself," Hermione murmured. "The dragon's energy shaped the land." Draco moved closer, his voice low. "Then we're walking inside its domain." The moment they reached the base of the ravine, the air grew warmer, and the fog parted to reveal a cavern mouth framed by obsidian rock. From within came the steady thrum of something vast and alive. Hermione stopped. "Do you feel that?" Draco's jaw tightened. "Every heartbeat." The heart drifted forward on its own, as if drawn to the sound. Its glow brightened, and the mark on Draco's wrist flared in response. Hermione reached out instinctively, placing her hand over his. The glow steadied, pulsing in harmony with her touch. He looked at her, surprise flickering across his features. "You're grounding it." "Maybe it's listening to both of us now," she said softly. They entered the cavern together. The air shimmered with heat, and the stone walls glowed faintly with inner fire. At the center lay a massive chamber lined with crystal veins, each one pulsing with faint light. And there, resting upon a ledge of molten rock, was the dragon. It was enormous, more majestic than Hermione could have imagined. Its scales shone like liquid moonlight, its wings folded close to its sides. When its eyes opened, they blazed with intelligence and recognition. The heart flared in Draco's presence, casting their shadows long across the glowing stone. The dragon's gaze shifted between them, and then, to Hermione's astonishment, it spoke, not in words, but through thought, its voice resonating in their minds. "You carry what was lost." Hermione's breath caught. The voice was neither male nor female, but ancient, vast, echoing through her very soul. Draco swallowed hard. "We didn't mean to take it. It chose me. The bond cannot be forced, only awakened." The dragon's gaze turned toward Hermione. "And you, child of the new age, why do you walk beside the marked one?" Hermione hesitated, feeling the sheer weight of that question. "Because he isn't what his name once meant. Because he's trying to be more than his past." The dragon's head lowered, its massive eyes narrowing. "You speak as if hearts may change." "They can," she said firmly. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then the dragon exhaled, a warm gust that stirred their cloaks. Perhaps. The old magic stirs once more, and with it the choice of the bond. But beware, for power awakens envy. Others will come, seeking what you now bear. Draco's grip on his wand tightened. Ilara's allies. And worse. The dragon's wings shifted, sending ripples of heat across the cavern. The heart must remain within the living flame, or the bond will consume you both. Protect it, guard it, or perish together. Before either could respond, the dragon lifted its wings and took flight. The rush of air knocked them back as it soared upward through a shaft of molten light, vanishing into the mountain's heart. The silence that followed felt almost sacred. Hermione and Draco stood motionless, staring at the space where the creature had been. Finally, Hermione spoke. "It said we'll perish together." He gave a small, grim smile. "Comforting, isn't it?" She rolled her eyes, but didn't hide her worry. "We need to stabilize the bond before it becomes volatile. That means finding a way to anchor the heart outside of you without breaking it." Draco sighed. "I was rather hoping we'd take a holiday instead." "Not until we've kept the world from burning down," she said with a faint smile. As they turned to leave the cavern, the ground trembled once more. From the shadows behind them, faint whispers began to rise. Voices neither human nor dragon, calling in a language older than time. Hermione froze. "Draco, we're not alone." He drew his wand, his eyes scanning the darkness. "I noticed." Shapes began to form within the mist. Tall, spectral figures clad in tattered robes, their eyes glowing with the same silver fire that marked Draco's wrist. The guardians of the heart had awoken, and they did not look pleased. The chamber filled with a cold light as the ghostly figures drifted closer, their shapes half seen through the glowing mist. Hermione's wand trembled slightly in her hand, not from fear, but from the overwhelming pressure that emanated from them. These were not ordinary spirits. Their presence carried the weight of centuries, and the air around them shimmered with ancient enchantments. Draco took a slow step backward, his voice low. Guardians. They were bound here to protect the heart. The lead figure floated forward, its translucent robes trailing across the molten stone. Its eyes were hollow pools of light, and when it spoke, the sound echoed through the air like wind in a grave. You disturb the sacred flame. Why have you come? Hermione's throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. We didn't come to steal. The heart awoke, and it bound itself to him. She gestured toward Draco, who stood tense beside her, his wrist still glowing faintly beneath his glove. The spirit's gaze turned toward him. A Malfoy, the blood that betrayed the oath. Draco stiffened, but his tone remained calm. Then perhaps it's time that blood made amends. For a moment, silence hung thick and heavy, and the faint hum of the heart deepened, resonating with the ghost's presence. Then the spirit raised its hand, and an icy wind swept through the cavern. Hermione's spell shields flickered instinctively. Prove your worth, child of deceit, the voice intoned. Let the flame test your heart. The light from the heart flared suddenly, and Draco cried out, collapsing to one knee, as silver fire seared through the mark on his wrist. Hermione rushed to his side, her wand outstretched. Stop! You'll kill him! But the spirits did not answer. The fire only grew brighter, rising from the stone floor in curling ribbons of light that wrapped around Draco like living chains. His eyes clenched shut, breath coming in sharp gasps. Draco, listen to me, Hermione said urgently, gripping his arm. You have to focus. The bond is reacting to their magic. Fight it. Don't resist it. His voice came strained through clenched teeth. That's easy for you to say. She pressed her hand to the mark, ignoring the burning pain that shot through her own palm. The heart's light responded instantly, shifting from harsh white to a deep, pulsing blue. The air grew still. The flames around Draco slowed, their brightness softening into a steady glow. The lead spirit lowered its hand, studying the two of them. You share the bond. Hermione's pulse hammered in her ears. We do. I helped stabilize it. The heart doesn't want destruction. It wants balance. The spirit's voice grew quieter, almost thoughtful. Two bound where once there was one. Perhaps the flame has chosen differently this time. Draco rose shakily to his feet, the mark on his wrist now dim and calm. If you want to test me, do it properly, but leave her out of it. Your courage is untested, the spirit replied, and for the first time there was something like respect in its tone. But you speak as one who understands loss. That may serve you yet. The ghosts began to fade, their light retreating into the walls. As the last one vanished, its voice echoed faintly through the cavern. Seek the tomb of ashes. There lies the truth of your bond. Only there will the flame be free. The chamber dimmed. Hermione and Draco stood alone again, the silence pressing close. The heart hovered between them, glowing softly as though exhausted from the ordeal. Hermione let out a long breath. The tomb of ashes. I've read of it. It's supposed to lie beyond the northern peaks, a place where fire and ice meet. Few have ever found it. Draco brushed soot from his sleeve. Sounds like an excellent holiday destination. She gave him a sharp look, but he smiled faintly. It was weary, but it was real, the kind of smile she'd never seen from him before. They left the cavern behind, emerging into the waning daylight. The fog had lifted, revealing a vast expanse of frozen wilderness stretching toward the horizon. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke, dragon fire, distant but near enough to feel in their bones. They traveled north, following the direction the ghosts had given. The journey was brutal. The path wound through ice-capped ridges and deep valleys where the snow glowed faintly with buried magic. The heart followed them, a silent companion whose glow guided their steps when the nights turned black. Hermione felt the strain of it, the constant thrum of power between her and Draco, the quiet awareness that hummed whenever their hands brushed or their eyes met. The bond was more than magical now. It was alive, unpredictable, and neither of them fully understood it. On the third night, a storm found them. Winds screamed through the mountain passes, tearing at their cloaks, and snow fell so thick it was hard to breathe. They conjured a small shelter of rock and charm work, crouching inside while the world outside turned to white fury. Draco sat opposite her, his wand light flickering against the stone walls. "Tell me something, Granger," he said after a while. "Why did you come on this expedition? You could have taken any post at the ministry." Hermione hesitated. The question caught her off guard. "Because I wanted something real," she said finally. "Something that wasn't politics or paperwork, magic that still feels alive." He watched her for a moment, the wind howling outside. "And now you've found it." "I didn't expect it to nearly kill us," she said wryly. Draco's smile deepened, though it was tinged with something softer. Regret, perhaps. "I used to think magic was just a tool, something to control, to master. But this..." He gestured toward the heart, floating quietly near the entrance. "This feels more like being part of something ancient, something that doesn't care who we were." Hermione met his gaze. Maybe that's the point. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't awkward or strained. The bond between them hummed faintly, steady and calm. The storm outside seemed distant, softened by the warmth that filled the tiny space. When dawn came, the world outside was quiet again, blanketed in new snow, untouched and gleaming. They set out once more, the sun rising pale and weak behind the clouds. By midday, the terrain began to change. The ice gave way to jagged black rock, steam rising from cracks that split the ground. The air smelled faintly of sulfur. Hermione paused at the crest of a ridge, her breath catching. "Look," she whispered. Below them stretched a valley unlike any they had seen. Rivers of molten fire snaked between cliffs of ice, and at the center stood a great stone fortress carved into the mountainside, its towers wreathed in smoke, its gates glowing faintly red. "The Tomb of Ashes," Draco said quietly. The heart brightened in answer, its pulse quickening as though it recognized the place. Hermione felt a chill run down her spine. If the legends are true, this is where the first dragon-human bond was sealed. Draco's gaze lingered on the fortress. Then this is where ours will be tested. As they began the descent into the valley, the air grew warmer, the ground trembling faintly beneath their boots. In the distance, the cry of a dragon echoed, not in warning this time, but in welcome. For better or worse, their path was set. The heart of the dragon had chosen them, and now the mountain itself awaited their fate. The valley of the Tomb of Ashes seemed to exist in a realm between two worlds, neither wholly alive nor entirely dead. The air shimmered with heat, yet frost clung stubbornly to the jagged cliffs. Every breath Hermione took felt charged, each heartbeat an echo of something vast that slumbered beneath the stone. The closer they drew to the fortress, the heavier the magic became, pressing down like the weight of unseen eyes. Draco stopped beside her at the ridge, his pale hair catching the crimson light from the molten rivers below. "It looks deserted," he said quietly. Hermione shook her head. "Places like this are never truly deserted. They're waiting." The heart floated ahead of them, glowing brighter with each step they took. Its light played across the stone as though tracing invisible paths. The air itself seemed to part for it, the flames dimming as they passed. By the time they reached the outer gates of the fortress, both of them felt the pulse of the heart beating through their own veins. The gates were massive, carved from black obsidian streaked with veins of silver. Old runes covered every inch, faintly glowing as if whispering secrets to one another. Hermione stepped closer, running her gloved fingers over a line of inscription. "It's a sealing spell," she murmured. "Old draconian, mixed with something even older. It's meant to respond to the bond." Draco exhaled slowly. "Then we're expected." He placed his marked hand against the gate. The moment he touched it, the runes flared, spreading light through the stone like cracks of fire through ice. The ground rumbled beneath them, and the gates began to open with a slow, thunderous groan. A wave of hot air rushed out, carrying the scent of ash and age. Inside lay a vast hall lit by rivers of molten rock running through channels in the floor. Statues lined the walls, dragons of every shape and size, their eyes inlaid with gemstones that glowed like dying embers. Hermione stepped forward, awe filling her chest. "This isn't a tomb," she whispered. "It's a sanctuary." Draco's eyes swept the chamber warily. A sanctuary for what? Her answer came not in words, but in a low, resonant hum that filled the air. The heart pulsed in time with it, and from the far end of the hall, a flame ignited on a raised dais. It burned silver white, its light soft yet fierce. They approached cautiously. The flame grew higher as they neared, and within it shimmered an image, a man and a dragon standing side by side. Hermione gasped. "It's the first bonded pair." The vision shifted. The man knelt, his hand pressed to a glowing crystal heart, much like the one now following Draco. The dragon bent its great head beside him, and together they sealed the crystal with a burst of shared fire. "The heart of the dragon," Hermione breathed. "It was forged through unity, not domination." Draco's expression darkened. "And my ancestors destroyed that unity." The vision dissolved, replaced by a new one. A battle. Flames and shadows, wizards and dragons tearing at one another, mountains shattering under their fury. The image flickered once, then vanished entirely, leaving only the sound of the molten rivers below. Hermione's voice was soft but firm. "This place holds their memory and their warning. If we fail to restore balance, the cycle begins again." Before Draco could reply, a sudden burst of wind swept through the hall. The statue's gemstone eyes flared, and from the shadows behind the dais emerged a figure, tall, cloaked, its face hidden behind a mask shaped like a dragon's skull. Draco's wand was in his hand instantly. "Another guardian." The voice that answered was cold, sharp, and utterly human. "A guardian? No, a seeker, like you, but far more deserving." Hermione's heart skipped. She knew that voice. "Ilara," she whispered. The masked figure removed her hood, and there she stood, very much alive, though her eyes burned with something no longer entirely human. Her once dark hair was streaked with silver fire, and faint lines of glowing runes traced her temples. "You should have perished," Hermione said, stunned. "The heart rejected me," Ilara finished with a bitter smile. "But it showed me the way to survive. The heart doesn't destroy those it deems unworthy. It transforms them. It burned away what was weak." Draco's wand remained trained on her. "And what's left?" "Purpose," she said simply. "You were never meant to carry that power, Malfoy. It belongs to the descendants of the first Guardian. To me." "The heart chose," Hermione said sharply. "You can't undo that." Ilara's gaze turned toward the hovering crystal. "Can't I?" She raised her wand, and a surge of dark fire shot across the room. Draco threw up a shield, the impact sending him stumbling backward. The heart shrieked, a sound that was neither human nor dragon, and its light flared violently. Hermione countered with a defensive spell, the air crackling with magic. Sparks flew, flames roared, and the very floor trembled. The runes along the walls ignited, casting wild shadows across the chamber. Draco shouted above the din. "She's feeding off the heart's resonance. She's trying to claim the bond." Hermione ducked another blast, her hair singed by the heat. "Then we have to sever her connection. Together." They moved as one. Hermione traced a rune in the air, her wand slicing bright arcs of light. Draco mirrored her motion, his magic intertwining with hers. The heart responded, its glow deepening until the whole hall was bathed in silver fire. Ilara screamed as the light struck her, her runes flaring in agony. "You don't understand," she cried. "The heart is a weapon, meant to command dragons, not befriend them." "Then you understand nothing," Hermione shouted. "Power isn't meant to rule, it's meant to protect." With one final surge, the combined spells struck. The air exploded in light and sound. The shock wave threw Hermione and Draco to the ground, their wands flying from their hands. When the brilliance faded, Ilara was gone. Only a scorched mark remained on the stone, and in its center, a single dragon scale gleamed faintly before turning to ash. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint, rhythmic pulse of the heart, steady once more. Draco sat up slowly, wincing. "Tell me we didn't just kill her." Hermione stared at the ashes. "I think the mountain took her back." He gave a tired laugh. "That's poetic and terrifying." She managed a small smile. "Welcome to ancient magic." They climbed to their feet, the heart hovering quietly between them. Its light had softened to a gentle glow, calmer now, almost content. Draco looked toward the dais where the silver flames still burned. "It's waiting for us," he said. Hermione nodded, understanding without needing to ask. Together, they stepped forward. As they reached the flame, the heart floated above it, pulsing in rhythm with their breathing. The flame rose higher, enveloping the crystal in light. For an instant, the chamber was filled with warmth and the faint echo of wings. Then, just as suddenly, the light receded. The heart settled between them, its glow now steady, no longer wild, but whole. Hermione felt a strange peace wash over her. "It's balanced," she whispered. The bond is complete. Draco met her eyes, his expression unreadable. Then what happens now? Before she could answer, the ground trembled again. Not with fury, but with something vast awakening below. A deep, resonant roar shook the mountain, echoing through every stone. The dragon was coming, and this time it would not come as a test, but as judgment. The roar reverberated through the mountain like thunder trapped beneath the earth. Dust fell from the vaulted ceiling as the molten rivers in the floor surged brighter, their heat rippling across the stone like the breath of some colossal beast. Hermione and Draco stood frozen before the dais, their wands in hand, though both knew instinctively that no spell could match the force that stirred beneath them. The dragon's voice rose again, not a roar this time, but a sound that trembled with fury and grief. The ancient walls answered in kind, their runes blazing to life one by one, weaving a lattice of silver light across the chamber. Hermione swallowed, her pulse hammering in her ears. "It's not coming for us," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's coming for what was awakened." Draco's eyes flicked toward the heart, which hovered motionless between them, its glow unsteady. "Then it's coming for me," he said quietly. The floor split open before them, and from the rift rose a wave of heat and flame. The air shimmered. The dragon emerged, immense, radiant, scales glinting like molten moonlight. Its wings brushed the walls, scattering molten dust that turned the air to gold. When its eyes opened, the world seemed to hold its breath. Hermione could not move. The creature's gaze was too vast, too ancient. Every instinct screamed at her to kneel, but she forced herself to stand her ground. Draco stood beside her, his expression pale yet resolute. The dragon's voice filled the chamber, neither spoken nor shouted, but heard within their very minds. The balance trembles once more. You have awakened what was bound in blood. Draco stepped forward, the light from the molten rivers outlining him in gold. I didn't mean to break it. The heart chose me. It's not my power to wield. All who bear the mark claim innocence, the dragon said, its tone neither cruel nor kind. But power chooses not the worthy. It chooses the willing. Hermione found her voice. Then test us, she said. If we've restored balance, let the heart prove it. A sound like a sigh rumbled through the dragon's chest. Bravery born of ignorance, yet tempered by purpose. Very well. The flame will judge. The dragon's wings unfurled, and a circle of fire sprang up around them, enclosing Hermione and Draco in its light. The heart floated upward, rising between them. Its glow pulsed in rhythm with the dragon's breath. Draco, Hermione whispered. Don't fight it this time. Let it see you. He looked at her, something raw flickering in his eyes. You're asking me to bare my soul to a dragon. I'm asking you to trust yourself. He hesitated, then nodded. The light from the heart intensified, spilling across the floor. It pulsed once, twice, and then the world fell away. For an instant, Hermione felt weightless. The ground vanished beneath her, replaced by endless sky. They stood not in the tomb of ashes, but within a boundless expanse of fire and mist. Memories shimmered in the air like reflections in water, flashes of Draco's life, of a mansion shrouded in silence, of a boy raised on pride and fear. She saw his defiance, his shame, the long years of solitude that followed the war, and beneath it all, a flicker of something that refused to die, hope. Draco turned to her, the firelight reflected in his eyes. It It's showing you everything, he said hoarsely. She nodded. It's showing me you. The light shifted. Now it was Hermione's turn. She felt the dragon's gaze pierce her, saw herself in 1,000 fragments, the girl who fought for justice, who stood against tyranny, who buried her heart beneath duty. She saw the choices she had made and the ones she had never dared to. Draco reached for her hand. Granger! The contact steadied her. Together, they faced the fire. The heart flared once more, and suddenly the two streams of light, his and hers, intertwined, forming a single ribbon that wrapped around them both. The air trembled. The dragon's voice returned, softer now. Two souls bound by choice, not by blood. Such a bond has not been forged in 1,000 years. The vision dissolved. They were back in the chamber, the fire circle fading into embers. The heart hovered quietly, its light warm and whole. The dragon lowered its massive head until its gaze met theirs. You have mended what was broken. The heart rests once more in balance, but the bond you share is no gift. It will test you, as all true bonds do. Draco drew a shaky breath. If that's the price, I'll pay it. The dragon's eyes softened, though the weight of its gaze remained immense. Then guard the flame well, Draco Malfoy. And you, Hermione Granger. Remember that knowledge alone cannot shield the heart. Only faith can. Before either could respond, the dragon spread its wings. Heat washed over them like sunlight after a storm. It rose into the air, passing through the open roof of the mountain, leaving behind a cascade of molten light that fell like rain. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Hermione exhaled slowly, realizing her hands were still trembling. Draco looked at the place where the dragon had vanished. I think, he said carefully, that might have been the most terrifying approval I've ever received. Hermione laughed, a soft, breathless sound that broke the tension. You handled it better than most ministry officials I've seen in front of the Wizengamot. He turned toward her, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. You'd be surprised how similar dragons and bureaucrats can be. They stood there for a while, letting the quiet sink in. The molten rivers still flowed, their glow gentler now, and the oppressive weight of the mountain's magic had lifted. The heart's calm, Hermione said, watching the crystal's steady pulse. It's in harmony again. That means the bond's stable. Draco nodded, though his eyes lingered on her hand, the one that had steadied his own. And what about us? He asked softly. She hesitated, caught off guard by the question. The faint light reflected off his face, highlighting the exhaustion, the scars, but also something new, the hint of peace. I think, she said finally, that we've both earned a little peace. He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting. Peace sounds dangerous. I might get used to it. Hermione rolled her eyes, but couldn't hide her smile. Come on, Malfoy. Let's get out of this infernal mountain before the next ancient creature decides to lecture us. They turned toward the open gates, the path ahead faintly lit by the heart's glow. As they walked, the crystal drifted beside them, humming softly, not as a burden now, but as a companion. When they emerged into the night, the stars above the valley blazed brighter than Hermione had ever seen. The air was cool and clean, carrying no trace of smoke or ash. Below, the rivers of molten rock had hardened into silver stone, gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Hermione stopped to look back at the mountain one last time. Do you think it's really over? Draco followed her gaze. With dragons and ancient magic? Never. But maybe, for us, it's a beginning. He held out his hand. She looked at it for a heartbeat, then took it without hesitation. And together, they walked down the valley, the heart of the dragon glowing softly between them, its rhythm matching the quiet, unspoken bond that had taken root not from legend or prophecy, but from choice. High above, the shadow of the great dragon circled once through the moonlight before vanishing into the clouds, its final roar fading into something that almost sounded like blessing. The descent from the mountain was long and silent. The snow, freshly fallen, gleamed like powdered glass under the faint light of dawn. Hermione walked a few steps ahead, her cloak sweeping through the frost, her thoughts tangled between exhaustion and wonder. Behind her, Draco kept pace with uncharacteristic quiet, the heart hovering between them. A small sun, steady and patient, its glow now golden rather than silver. Neither spoke much as they followed the ridge downward. Every few minutes, the wind rose to whisper through the pines, carrying a low hum that reminded them they were still within the dragon's domain. Yet something had changed. The air felt lighter, freer, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. At last, they reached a plateau overlooking the valley. Hermione stopped to catch her breath and turned to look back. The mountain behind them was no longer aflame. The fissures that had once bled molten light were sealed in smooth lines of crystal, gleaming faintly beneath the snow. It stood calm, almost sleeping. Draco followed her gaze. "You realize," he said softly, "that no one at the ministry will believe a word of this." Hermione smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "They'll believe what they can measure. The rest will become myth." He gave a low chuckle. "And where does that leave us?" "Between myth and memory," she said, her tone wistful. "Exactly where most truths end up." They set up a small camp at the edge of the plateau, too weary to travel farther. Hermione conjured a fire that burned blue against the cold, while Draco unpacked what little remained of their supplies. A few crumbs of bread, a flask of tea, and a single bar of chocolate Hermione had somehow kept untouched through all their chaos. He handed it to her with mock solemnity. "Your ration, Professor Granger, the last treasure of the expedition." She accepted it, amused. "A fitting reward for surviving dragons, curses, and you." He smirked. "Careful, I might think you're warming up to me." She broke the chocolate in two and offered him half. "Consider this a truce." He took it, their fingers brushing. The contact was brief but electric. Neither spoke after that. The moment was too fragile to name. They ate in silence, the firelight painting their faces in shifting shades of gold and blue. As night fell, the stars reappeared, sharp and endless. The heart floated above the fire, humming quietly, its glow matching the rhythm of their breathing. Hermione watched it for a while, chin resting on her knees. "Do you feel it still?" she asked softly. Draco glanced at his wrist, where the faint mark pulsed beneath his skin. "Always. It's not heavy, not anymore. More like an echo." She nodded. "The dragons said it would test us." He gave a dry laugh. "I think we've passed enough tests for one lifetime." But there was something unspoken in his voice, an uncertainty that mirrored her own. She could feel the bond between them even now, not just through magic, but through something deeper. Every emotion, weariness, relief, the quiet ache of what might come next, resonated faintly in that shared pulse. They slept in turns that night, though neither truly rested. When dawn came, a thin mist clung to the valley below. The heart dimmed its light, as if sensing their need for silence. They resumed their journey by morning, the path winding down through dense forest. Hermione used her wand to mark safe trails, while Draco carried their packs, his pace steady. There was something almost domestic about it, and the simplicity of it made Hermione smile despite herself. By noon, they reached the edge of the forest, where the snow thinned into grass. The world beyond looked ordinary. Green hills, scattered cottages, the faint smoke of distant hearths. It felt strange, after everything, to see the world unchanged. Draco stopped beside her, his expression unreadable. "So," he said slowly, "what happens now?" Hermione hesitated. "We return to the ministry, report what we can. The heart must be safeguarded, studied properly, not hidden away." He arched an eyebrow. "And they'll let you keep it?" "Of course not," she admitted, smiling ruefully. "They'll lock it in the department's vault and pretend it's another classified artifact. But it won't matter. Its balance is restored. It won't answer to anyone else now." Draco's gaze flicked toward the heart, which hovered quietly at her shoulder. "It's still bound to us." Hermione nodded. "Yes, but maybe that's how it's meant to be. A reminder, not a weapon." They walked on. The sound of running water reached them before they saw it. A small river cutting through the hillside, its surface bright in the sunlight. Hermione stopped at the bank, kneeling to wash her hands. The cold water felt grounding, real. Draco knelt beside her, scooping a handful of water to his lips. For a moment, neither spoke. The simplicity of it, clear water, bright air, no ancient magic humming in the background, felt almost sacred. Hermione broke the silence first. "You know, Malfoy, I never thought I'd say this, but you're a decent travel companion." He glanced at her sidelong, smirking. That almost sounded like a compliment. "Don't let it go to your head." They lingered by the river for a while before setting off again. As the path widened, they saw a small village ahead, a scattering of stone cottages surrounded by pines. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the faint sound of bells carried on the wind. Civilization. Hermione exhaled in relief. "We'll find a portkey there. I'll contact the ministry once we're settled." Draco's gaze lingered on the heart, now floating faintly between them, its glow dimmed to little more than a soft halo. "And then?" She looked at him, realizing what he meant. "Then you decide where you go next." He gave a quiet laugh, though it sounded tired. "After all this, I'm not sure I can go back to England. The manor feels like another lifetime." Hermione hesitated, then said gently, "Maybe it's time for a new one." He met her eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. Something fragile but unmistakable. The kind of understanding that only comes after surviving the impossible together. By evening, they reached the village. The locals greeted them with wary curiosity. Two travelers in tattered cloaks, dusted with frost and dragon ash. Hermione conjured a small room at the inn, while Draco arranged for supplies. When they finally sat across from each other, in the dim candlelight of the common room, exhaustion threatened to pull them both under. The heart rested between them on the table, glowing faintly. The innkeeper, oblivious to its nature, had simply called it a curious lamp. Hermione traced the edge of her teacup. "It's strange," she said softly. "For years, I thought the world had grown quiet, that after the war there were no mysteries left. And now—" Draco leaned back in his chair. "Now you've found a dragon's heart, bound your soul to it, and saved the world's balance. I'd say that qualifies as a mystery." She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I think the real mystery is what happens next." He considered her for a long moment. Then softly, "You could always use another researcher." Hermione blinked, surprised. "You'd work with me?" "I'd rather not work for the Ministry," he said dryly. "But if it meant not watching you get yourself killed, I might consider it." She laughed, and the sound startled them both, bright, unrestrained, echoing faintly through the inn. "Careful, Malfoy," she said, still smiling. "You almost sound like a decent human being." He tilted his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Almost." Outside, the night deepened. The heart of the dragon dimmed at last, its glow fading to a soft ember, not gone, merely resting. The wind whispered through the pines beyond the window, carrying a distant echo of wings. Neither of them spoke again that night, but when they finally rose to retire, their hands brushed once more. A brief touch, enough to spark the same quiet pulse that bound their fates together. And though the storm had passed, Hermione knew deep down that some journeys do not end. They only change their shape. The following days passed in a strange stillness, as if time itself hesitated around them. The village lay cradled in the valley's hollow, wrapped in snow and the smell of pinewood smoke. Life moved there at a quiet rhythm. The toll of distant bells, the slow crunch of boots on frozen paths, the soft murmur of firelight spilling through windows at dusk. For the first time in months, Hermione allowed herself to stop. She spent her mornings at the small window of their rented room, writing her report for the Ministry by candlelight. Her quills scratched steadily across the parchment, though each word carried the heavy awareness that what she wrote, even written carefully, could never capture the truth. There was no language precise enough to describe what they had seen, what they had felt. Draco, on the other hand, could never seem to sit still. He spent his days walking the forest paths beyond the village, sometimes disappearing for hours, returning with snow tangled in his hair and an expression that was hard to read. He claimed he was searching for traces of the dragon's energy, but Hermione suspected he was looking for silence, a way to reconcile himself with what had changed inside him. The heart of the dragon stayed close. It no longer burned with fierce light, but hovered quietly in the corner of their room, its golden glow reflecting softly on the wooden walls. Sometimes at night, when the fire dimmed, it would hum faintly, a low, contented sound, as if dreaming. Hermione found it oddly comforting, like the rhythmic breathing of a sleeping creature. One evening she found Draco sitting by the inn's hearth, a glass of mulled wine untouched beside him. The light from the flames caught the faint silver lines of the mark on his wrist. He didn't notice her at first. His gaze was far away, lost in the shifting embers. "You're brooding again," she said softly, sitting opposite him. He raised an eyebrow. "I'm reflecting." "Brooding," she repeated, her smile small but genuine. He huffed a quiet laugh. Fine. Brooding. You'd think saving the world would be more satisfying. Hermione folded her hands in her lap. You're not used to peace, are you? He turned his glass slowly between his fingers, the firelight catching on the ring of silver at its base. Peace feels like waiting, like the pause before something else begins. Maybe that's all peace ever is, she said. They sat in silence for a time. The murmur of the inn drifted around them, the clink of mugs, the creak of wood, the occasional laugh. Hermione found herself studying him when she thought he wasn't looking. The sharp angles softened by fatigue, the faint line that had settled at the corner of his mouth. He looked older now, but not in the way war had aged people. It was a different kind of change, the kind that came from carrying magic too ancient for any human to bear. At length, Draco spoke again, his voice low. You know, I never asked. Why did you come? To this expedition, I mean. You could have chosen any assignment in the world. Hermione leaned back, eyes half-lidded. Because I was afraid of becoming ordinary. That startled a short laugh out of him. Granger, you've never been ordinary. I don't mean in that way, she said, shaking her head. After the war, after the rebuilding, everything became rules and reports. I spent years organizing the world into neat categories. Safe, dangerous, permitted, forbidden. And yet, her gaze drifted toward the heart glowing softly in the corner. Magic was never meant to fit inside boxes. I think I needed to remember that. Draco's expression softened. You always did have to understand everything. She smiled faintly. And you always had to hide everything. He didn't deny it. The next morning brought sunlight, pale but bright, spilling over the snowy roofs. Hermione awoke to find the heart hovering near the window, its glow flickering like a heartbeat. She rose and joined it, resting her fingers lightly against the glass pane. Outside, the forest glistened, and somewhere distant, she thought she heard the faint echo of wings. Draco stirred behind her, sitting up with a groan. If that's another dragon, I'm going back to bed. Hermione laughed. It's just the wind. Probably. He rubbed his eyes, smirking. Probably? That's reassuring. They left the village soon after, following the main road toward the lowlands. Word had spread. The ministry wanted her back in London to present her findings. Draco, to her mild surprise, had agreed to accompany her, though he insisted he'd remain an observer. Hermione didn't argue. She was grateful for his company. Their journey took them through forests and meadows, where the snow melted into rivulets, through small towns where people stopped to stare at the glowing orb that floated at Hermione's shoulder. Children whispered that it was a captured star. Hermione didn't correct them. At night, when they camped under the wide stretch of stars, Draco would conjure a low fire, and Hermione would read aloud from her notes, translations of the runes they'd seen, fragments of history half buried in time. He listened more than he spoke, though occasionally he'd correct her pronunciation or add a detail about draconic lore that only someone raised on old stories could know. One night, after hours of quiet conversation, she set her notes aside and looked across the fire at him. When we reach London, what will you do? He considered for a long moment. Not sure. The name Malfoy doesn't open doors the way it used to. Hermione smiled faintly. Maybe that's for the best. He looked into the fire. Perhaps. I thought I wanted to rebuild what was lost. The house, the legacy, the reputation. But I think I've finally realized that the only thing worth rebuilding is myself. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. For a moment, she saw not the boy she had once known, but the man he had become. Someone who had walked through fire and come out tempered rather than burned. "You already have," she said softly. Draco's gaze lifted to hers. The flicker of the fire danced in his grey eyes, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed very still. Then he smiled, small and genuine. "Maybe we both have." They reached London a week later. The city looked unchanged, the same cobbled streets, the same mist curling over the Thames. Yet Hermione felt as though she was seeing it anew. Magic hummed beneath its surface, not the ancient power of mountains and dragons, but the quiet, living kind that came from people. Laughter, warmth, the steady pulse of ordinary life. At the ministry, she presented her findings to the department's council. Her report was careful, precise, deliberately understated. She spoke of the expedition, of the discovery of the heart, of the stabilization of its magic. She did not mention Draco's name, nor the bond they shared. Some truths, she decided, were not meant to be catalogued. When the meeting ended, she found him waiting outside the chamber, leaning against the wall, his hands in his coat pockets. "Well?" he asked. "They're sending a research team to study the region," she said. "The heart will remain under my guardianship, temporarily." "Temporarily," he repeated with a smirk. "Meaning indefinitely?" Hermione shrugged, smiling. "Something like that." They walked together through the marble corridors toward the atrium, where daylight spilled through enchanted glass. For a moment, it felt like the end of a long, impossible journey. Yet Hermione knew better. At the ministry's entrance, they paused. The city stretched before them, alive, imperfect, full of promise. Draco glanced at her. "You'll write, won't you?" "Of course," she said, "though you'll have to write back." He smiled faintly. "We'll see." The heart drifted between them, its light flickering in rhythm with their steps. Hermione turned toward him, her voice low. "You know, Malfoy, I think the dragon was right." He tilted his head. "About what?" "About bonds. They test you, but they're worth keeping." Draco's smile deepened, and this time it reached his eyes. "Then I suppose we'll see how long ours lasts." And as they stepped out into the bustling London street, the heart shimmered once, bright as dawn, a reminder of mountains and fire, of choices made and lives intertwined. The world moved on around them, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Somewhere far to the east, beyond the horizon, a dragon's roar echoed faintly across the sky, not in warning, but in farewell. Spring crept slowly into England. The air softened, the frost retreated from the hills, and London, noisy, alive, unrelenting, began to stir with its usual rhythm. To most of the city, the season meant nothing more than blooming parks and longer daylight. But to Hermione, it carried the strange quiet of aftermath, that fragile calm after the storm when one isn't quite sure how to begin again. Her office in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures was piled high with scrolls and books. Reports of dragon sightings arrived daily now, faint traces of magic awakening in the Highlands, old wards reactivating, ancient scales uncovered in places where none should exist. Each parchment she unrolled smelled faintly of dust and secrets. The world had begun to shift, and though few realized it, Hermione knew the dragon's awakening had rippled far beyond that distant mountain. Still, she worked. She wrote. She taught young researchers how to classify runes and identify magical residue. And every so often, when the candle burned low and the ministry's corridors emptied, she'd look toward the heart of the dragon, still hovering in its containment ward, its soft golden glow a reminder of everything that had happened. It never left her office. The ministry wanted it moved, catalogued, tested, but every time they tried, the wards refused to yield. It remained loyal only to her and to the faint echo of Draco's magic that pulsed within it. She hadn't seen him since that morning outside the ministry doors. He'd vanished without ceremony, leaving behind only a brief note written in his sharp, elegant script. Gone north. I need to see if the world feels different now. She had smiled when she read it, half in exasperation, half in fondness. It was a very Draco thing to do, to disappear not out of arrogance, but restlessness. Yet as the weeks passed, she found herself listening for owls that never came. Until one evening in late April. Hermione was leaving the ministry after dusk when the first whisper reached her. It was faint, a hum of magic, a tone she knew by heart. She turned sharply, scanning the atrium. The heart pulsed faintly through the wall of her office far above, as if sensing something in the air. And then she heard it, a single distant roar. Not loud, not terrifying, but deep enough to vibrate through the glass of the ministry's great dome. She froze. The dragon. By the time she reached the courtyard, the sound had faded, replaced by the hush of the night wind. Only a few late-working witches looked up, puzzled. The world went on as usual, unaware that something vast had stirred again. Hermione's pulse steadied. She smiled faintly to herself. Somewhere, out there, the dragon still flew. Somewhere, Draco Malfoy was still bound to its heart. Weeks later, a letter arrived by Owl, sealed with green wax and a faint scent of ash. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Granger, the Highlands are colder than I remember. The locals whisper about silver shadows over the locks. I think our friend is restless again, but it's peaceful here. I've built something small, a refuge of sorts for magical creatures. Don't laugh. I'm rather good at mending broken things now. The dragons keep their distance, but sometimes I feel them near. It's enough. How's the heart? Still ignoring ministry regulations, I hope. I trust it's in capable hands. Yours, not theirs. If you find yourself missing fieldwork, and I know you will, you'll find me where the fire meets the fog. DM. Hermione read it twice, the corners of her lips curving. The wax seal bore no crest, only a faint impression of a dragon's wing. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake beneath the soft light of her bedside lamp, the letter open on the table. The bond that tied them, faint, invisible, but ever present, pulsed gently in her chest. She could feel it then, subtle as a heartbeat. The same warmth that had flared between them in the mountains still lived, neither dimmed nor forgotten. The following morning, she made her decision. By midday, she had submitted her leave request. By evening, she was standing at the edge of the Scottish Highlands, her cloak tugged by sharp wind, her hair unbound. The landscape stretched wild and endless before her, rolling hills scarred by old magic, the air alive with the hum of things unseen. She followed the pull she felt deep within, the faint magnetic draw of the bond. It led her along an old path through the moors, where the heather bent low and the clouds hung heavy with rain. The further she walked, the stronger the sense of familiarity grew. At last, she saw it. A cluster of stone buildings nestled in a hollow, smoke curling lazily from their chimneys. It was simple, weathered, yet sturdy, unmistakably his. Draco stood outside, sleeves rolled up, repairing a section of fencing with his wand. He looked up when he sensed her approach, and for a heartbeat, both of them simply stared. "Granger," he said at last, and though his voice was even, his eyes softened. "You found me." "You left a rather obvious trail," she replied, smiling. "I did no such thing." "The dragon did." He paused, lips twitching. "Ah, my most reliable informant." She took in the view, the hills, the faint shimmer of wards around the sanctuary, the quiet peace that hung in the air. "So, this is what you've been doing," she said. "Trying to keep my promise," he replied, "guarding what remains." The heart, which had followed her faithfully all the way north, drifted between them, glowing a little brighter now that the two of them stood together again. Its hum filled the space, warm and familiar. Hermione stepped closer, her breath visible in the cool air. "It missed you." Draco's smile was small but genuine. "I missed it too." His gaze met hers. "And perhaps other things." The wind rose, carrying the scent of rain and pine. Above them, a shadow passed, vast, gliding, silent. The dragon, high against the clouds, wheeled once before disappearing into the mist. They both looked up, and neither spoke. Words seemed unnecessary. When Draco finally turned back to her, the weariness that had shadowed him was gone. "You should see the creatures that come here," he said. "Thestrals, mooncalves, even a few shy dragons. It's strange. They trust me now." "Maybe you learn to trust yourself first," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "You sound like the dragon." Hermione smiled. "You listened to it once." For a while, they simply stood together, the world quiet except for the wind and the faint hum of the heart. Then, as the last light of day faded, Draco gestured toward the cottage. "Come inside, Granger. There's tea and warmth. And you look frozen." She laughed, the sound soft but bright against the gathering dusk. "You're bossy as ever. And you're stubborn," he said. "It's a miracle the mountains didn't collapse under the weight of our arguing." They walked together toward the cottage. Behind them, the heart floated peacefully, its glow mingling with the first stars of evening. As Hermione crossed the threshold, she felt something loosen in her chest, a sense of coming home to a place she hadn't known she'd been searching for. Draco set the kettle on the fire, glancing at her over his shoulder. "You're staying a while, I hope?" Hermione met his gaze, her smile slow and sure. "For as long as it takes." Outside, far beyond the hills, the dragon's cry echoed once through the night, not in farewell, but in welcome. And beneath its voice, two heartbeats, human and magical, pulsed in time with the quiet, steady light of the heart of the dragon. The hearth crackled softly, its golden light spilling across the wooden floorboards of Draco's cottage. Outside, the wind sang through the heather and distant mountains. Within, warmth wrapped the space like an enchantment. Hermione sat at the small table near the fire, a steaming cup between her hands. Draco moved quietly about the room, conjuring extra logs for the fire, setting plates on the table with a practiced flick of his wand. The silence between them was not awkward anymore. It was steady, familiar, the kind of silence that belonged to people who had survived something extraordinary together and no longer needed to fill the space with words. When he finally joined her, the firelight touched the faint silver thread on his wrist, where the dragon's mark still gleamed beneath the skin. He caught her looking. "It never fades," he said softly. "Some nights it burns brighter. I think it reacts to the sky, or to the dragon itself." Hermione tilted her head. "Or to you." He smiled faintly. "You always think in human terms. You still believe magic should make sense." "And you think it shouldn't?" "I think," he said, "that some things are meant to stay wild." Hermione looked into the fire. The flames danced in shades of gold and blue, their reflection flickering across her eyes. "Maybe you're right. After all, it was the wildness that saved us." He didn't reply, but she saw his hand twitch slightly, as if resisting the impulse to reach for hers. The silence stretched again, and outside the wind shifted, carrying the faintest tremor of something larger, a deep, resonant hum that neither of them mistook for weather. The dragon's song. It rolled through the night like thunder over water, distant but unmistakable. The heart, which rested on the mantel, stirred in answer, glowing faintly, its pulse steady and sure. Hermione turned her head toward it, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's calling." Draco rose, crossing to the window. The hills outside shimmered faintly beneath the moonlight. The shadow of wings passed once across the sky, so vast and silent it seemed the clouds themselves bowed to it. He didn't move for a long while, simply watching. Hermione joined him, the two of them framed against the window's glow. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Draco nodded. "It's free." They stood there together, the warmth of the room at their backs and the chill of the night before them. Then Draco turned, his gaze resting on her face with quiet intensity. "You could stay here," he said. "The research, the ministry, you don't owe them your whole life." Hermione's lips curved faintly. "You mean abandon my career to chase dragons across the Highlands with you?" "I mean," he said, "find something that belongs to you. Not to duty, not to expectation, just to you." His words struck deeper than she wanted to admit. All her life, she had measured herself by the work she did, by the changes she could force into the world through effort and will. But now, standing here, surrounded by ancient mountains and unbroken sky, she realized that the world did not always need fixing. Sometimes it simply needed witnessing. "I don't know if I can," she said honestly. Draco's expression softened. "Then stay until you do." The simplicity of it, the offer without demand, the space to choose, filled her with a warmth she hadn't known she'd been missing. They spoke little after that. The night deepened, the wind quieted, and the heart glowed like a living ember above the mantel. When Hermione finally slept, it was to the sound of the dragon's distant breathing and the steady rhythm of Draco's footsteps as he paced before the fire, a habit she knew he would never lose. Morning broke clear and cold. The world outside sparkled under a pale sun, and frost rimed the windows. Hermione woke to the smell of tea and the faint rustle of parchment. Draco was at the table, his hair a pale halo in the morning light, scribbling notes on a piece of parchment. "What are you writing?" she asked sleepily. He glanced up, the faintest of smirks on his lips. "Field observations. You're rubbing off on me." Hermione laughed softly. "Merlin, help us all." He pushed a cup toward her. "Drink. We've got a long day ahead." She arched a brow. "We?" "I assumed you wouldn't be able to resist exploring," he said, leaning back in his chair. "There's a ridge beyond the valley where the dragons roost. The wards are old, but they still hold. I thought we might see what's left of the sanctuary." Hermione took a sip of tea, pretending to think. "So, you're asking for my help?" "I'm asking for your company," he said simply. Her heart gave a small, traitorous flutter. She set her cup down carefully. "Then let's go." They left the cottage soon after. The morning air was sharp, carrying the scent of pine and ash. The path wound upward through the valley, their boots crunching over frost-hardened earth. As they climbed, the heart followed, hovering between them, shedding its soft golden light over the snow. When they reached the ridge, the view stole Hermione's breath. Below lay a great hollow of rock and mist, where the ground shimmered faintly with magic. At its center, coiled among stones that glowed like embers, rested the dragon. It was magnificent. Its wings were folded close, its scales reflecting the light of the sun in ripples of silver and white. It raised its head as they approached, eyes like molten gold fixing on them both. Hermione felt no fear this time, only awe. The dragon's voice filled the air, not in words, but in the deep, sonorous hum that resonated through bone and sky alike. The heart responded instantly, its light flaring bright. Draco stood beside her, his expression unreadable. "You came back," Hermione whispered. Draco nodded once. It was never finished. The dragon exhaled, sending a wave of warm air across the ridge. For a moment, Hermione thought she saw something shift within the creature's gaze. Not recognition exactly, but something older, deeper. Gratitude, perhaps. The heart pulsed again, brighter, then slowly dimmed, its glow settling to a quiet warmth. The dragon lowered its head, closing its eyes. The message was clear. The balance held. The flame endured. Hermione turned to Draco. "It's letting us go." He met her gaze, and in that instant she understood. Not everything needed to be held. Some things could simply be. They lingered on the ridge until the sun began to sink, painting the world in shades of gold and violet. The dragon did not move again, but its breath rolled steady and sure through the valley. On the walk back, Draco broke the silence first. "You realize this will all sound mad when you try to write it down." Hermione smiled. "Good stories always do." He laughed quietly, and for the first time since she'd met him, the sound carried no trace of bitterness. When they reached the cottage, twilight had fallen. The heart floated to its resting place above the mantel once more, its glow casting a soft halo across the room. Hermione sank into a chair, exhaustion mingling with quiet contentment. Draco poured them each a cup of tea, then joined her by the fire. Outside, the wind howled gently through the valley, and somewhere far away, the dragon's voice echoed, not in sorrow or fury, but in song. Hermione looked into the fire, her voice soft. "Do you think it will always watch us?" Draco followed her gaze. "No," he said. "I think it trusts us to watch ourselves." She smiled at that, her eyes meeting his across the flickering light. "Then we'd better not disappoint it." The heart of the dragon pulsed once more, bright, alive, eternal, and then settled into stillness. Outside, under the stars, the great creature's shadow passed once more across the moonlit sky before vanishing into the clouds, leaving behind only the faint shimmer of its magic and the quiet promise of peace. And in the small cottage at the edge of the world, two souls sat together by the fire, bound not by prophecy or blood, but by choice, by the courage to face the wildness of magic and of the heart itself. For in the end, the dragon had not taught them how to wield power. It had taught them how to live.